Welcome back to Lisa's Family Table. And we're also really thrilled to have a special guest with us today. This is Zach Parks, and he's the executive chef at Rail Garden in Memphis. And so to have somebody with your background and your caliber of a chef is really exciting and such an honor for me. So I'm excited to have you here today as we cook these beautiful Wagyu filets. We're so excited. I mean, I just have to give a close-up of these because they're such beautiful steaks. And we're going to post a link in our video below to Butcher Shop in Pensacola, Florida. They do meat subscription boxes because we recognize more and more people are cooking at home. So thank you.
Well, let me just thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be in the presence of a world food champion, and I'm really excited to be here and, like you said, eat on those steaks.
Exciting, right?
Very exciting.
So how are we going to cook them today?
Well, today what we're going to do is a sous vide or reverse sear in the oven. For those of you that don't know what sous vide is, it's basically cooking your meat in a water bath at a certain temperature. And if you don't have a sous vide, something fairly similar would be doing a reverse sear from the oven into a cast iron skillet.
Right, and I think that's the most important thing that we want to reinforce today, right? Is that it is so easy to cook these steaks at home. You don't really need special equipment. We are going to use the sous vide today, but honestly, they used to be cost prohibitive, but they're very affordable on Amazon now. You can go ahead and get them, but if you don't have one and you still want to try this technique, really all you need is a $20 cast iron skillet. You can get it at your local hardware store, Bed Bath & Beyond. Even though we're going to use the sous vide today, if you were just to do this in your oven, you would put the steak in your cast iron skillet at about 250 degrees.
Yeah, about 250 to 280.
275, yeah, until it comes to your desired internal temperature. So today, we're going to sous vide to an internal temperature of 115 degrees because once we put it in the pan to sear it, we want to bring it out to about 128 degrees before we rest it because we're looking for a medium rare to rare. So we did weigh them out. Two of them are about 8 ounces and the larger one is about 10 ounces. We're going to sous vide them for about an hour. If this was a different grade other than Wagyu, I would probably go an hour and a half, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could talk about the grades, right? So when you think about steak, they come in all ranges from select, which is typically used for ground types of meats that you might see. And then you have choice, which is commonly what you would find at Kroger or any of your other supermarkets. And those are great cuts. The prime is the next step up, the premium cut of that. And then above that is Wagyu. And even within Wagyu, there are grades. This is the highest grade of Wagyu. What makes the difference is the amount of fat. And you can see the marbling in here, the beautiful striations of fat. And as we cook this on the high temperature later, that fat's gonna melt and it's just gonna make that steak so buttery and soft and juicy. So we're excited. Should we begin?
Let's do it.
Okay. Since we're sous videing and I do a lot of competitive cooking, so I use these reusable bags, and I like them also because they're environmentally friendly. But when I'm at a competition, they're easy for me to use, and I don't have to have a vacuum sealer. But you actually just use a Ziploc.
Right, yeah. When you're not in the competition setting and you're just, kind of just cooking and having a good time, you can also just use a regular Ziploc bag, and you can actually just use the water displacement method, where you just put your ingredients in the bottom of the bag and then slowly put it down in the water, and the water will naturally push all the air out of it.
Right. If you just had the cast iron skillet, if you wanted to put it in the oven, but if you did make the investment in the sous vide, you don't have to have special bags. But these Anova bags, they're available at Target, so they're not hard to get. They're easily accessible. So we're just going to open these up. And I like to put some herbs. The one thing is, don't salt your steak before the reverse sear. I've seen all kinds of different opinions on this, but I'm just going to share with my opinion. And Zach and I were talking about it earlier, and we both agree. If you salt it ahead of time, it can make the steak a little mealy because salt will naturally want to tenderize the steak. The filet is already a pretty tender cut.
That's right, yeah, you cannot get any more.
Right, and this is so buttery anyway. It's a beautiful steak. So just salting it is going to give you a weird texture. We don't want that. We're not wanting roast beef. If we wanted roast beef, we'd buy chuck roast. So we're going to enjoy the steak for what it's intended to be. So here's the larger steak. Of course, we have washed our hands. And I'm putting it in the bag. I'm putting a garlic clove. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to put some thyme. And I'm going to put a little rosemary in there.
Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, you think that's too big?
I think that's perfect.
Okay. I love having a chef in the house. So excited. And you'll know pretty quickly if it's sealed because the air won't come out of it. if it's not sealed. So you just use this to kind of go over it and just make sure it's sealed. And then it has this little vent right here, and you take this little pump. So, and you can see the air is coming out.
And that's much more cost effective than actually having a vac sealer as well.
It is, because these are also, and I put them in the top shelf of my dishwasher. I rinse them out with a little soap and water, and then I put it in the top shelf of my dishwasher. So we're going to put these in here. We'll do the same thing. Put some more extra stuff because
there's 2 in that one.
There's 2 in that one. Rosemary is always a little strong for me, so I'm always a little careful when I'm doing it.
I prefer more thyme than rosemary.
You know,
myself.
I do too. That's not like, you know, it has that lemony. I guess because I'm an Italian, I like lemon on everything. So I'll seal this up too. Okay, so that's done. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to drop them in this water bath, which is at temperature now. So we're going to drop it in here.
Now you want to make sure you don't have too much water in here, otherwise when you place your meats and your proteins, it's going to overflow with water. They usually have a minimum and a maximum line to let you know how much water to put in there.
Okay, so we've got them in there at 115 degrees. We've vacuum sealed them, and we're going to leave them in there for about an hour. Now, if this was, as we were talking about earlier, a choice cut, we would go a little longer. We would probably go an hour and a half. I will say don't go beyond that with a filet because it'll start tasting like roast beef, and that's not your goal here. But for a Wagyu of this quality, we just really need an hour, and frankly, we may pull out a little bit earlier than that. We're just wanting to bring it up to a good internal temperature so that when we sear it, it'll be really tender and juicy. And so just put the top on it. We're going to let it rest.
Oh, I can't wait.
Our fillets have been sitting in the sous vide for an hour now, so we're going to pull them out. We're going to show you, you know, Zach's going to show you how he would sear them in a cast iron skillet at his restaurant. I'm going to show you how to make a sauce, and we're going to show you a quick plating of that. So we're going to dry them off and show you how to season them up. I can smell the garlic, I can smell the rosemary. It's very aromatic, and you can see all the juice in there. And that's not taking juice out of the steak. It's not going to take any of the juiciness. You're going to see when we cut the steak open just how incredibly juicy it is. We're going to take some paper towels. We're going to dry these steaks off, because if you try to cook these steaks wet, you're not going to get the sear. They've got to be dry. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to season it up because we want to create a crust on it. So we're going to use my steak rub again.
The award-winning steak rub.
Yes. You know, and take some time and roll the edges into it too.
Yeah, get all the goodness in there.
Because, you know, the steak is, you're eating the whole steak, not just the top and the bottom. We're going to switch gears for a second, and we're going to start on our sauce because the sauce is going to take a little time to cook. So we're going to bring the temperature up. I'm starting it off at high because I'm going to put some butter in my dish, in my pan. All right, so I've got, this is unsalted butter, by the way. I'd like to control how much salt is in my dish. And so I'm just putting a couple tablespoons in there. You can't take salt out, but you can put it in later when you taste the dish. So we just did that. We're melting the butter. And then we've got some shallots here. And this was, our shallot was so big, I just did a half of a shallot.
The shallot's probably my favorite of the onion family.
Mine too. Mine too.
We call it the queen of the onion.
I like that because it's so much more delicate. You get the flavor, but it's not overpowering. I've reduced the heat here down to medium because I don't want to burn this. Like I said, I really want to sweat these onions. I don't want them to have color to them.
A little translucency.
Mm-hmm. And when they kind of get opaque, we're going to add some brandy. So I've got a 1/4 cup of brandy, and the recipe will be available on my blog, which we'll have to link up below. But the main thing is when you're cooking with alcohol, always turn your heat off first because you could just blow up a flame in your face, and nobody really wants to do that. So I'm going to shut my heat off. So I put the brandy in, and again, make sure flame is off because that could poof right up on you and it could be very dangerous. So here's going. See? Ta-da! And so we're just going to let that swirl around.
Now, essentially what you're doing is cooking out the alcohol.
Correct. So I'm going to use half of this 8-ounce thing of bone broth, and I'm going to put a half a thing of this beef granules in it. Now this is very salty in and of itself, so I don't plan to salt this until I'm done with the whole thing because I want to make sure I'm not over salting my dish. open up the stock, and like I said, I'm gonna put about half of it, but it's gotta reduce. Okay, so I did about half of it, and then I'm gonna put half of this in. And again, these things have so much salt, so you just have to be careful to not overdo it. And I'm gonna put my heat back on. During the competition, this is how I cooked it. I cooked it this way because you're only given an hour, and making stock is a good 10-hour process. And so there was no way in the competition I was gonna be able to do that. So this was a great way for me to simulate what I wanted the taste to be. This looks great. It's all kind of coming together.
Oh yeah.
And I'm gonna switch gears now, and I'm gonna put it over here so it can continue to reduce. And I'll turn it over to you, and I'm gonna turn this on so it can continue to reduce.
So what I'm about to do is I'm gonna turn my heat on and get this pan really hot. Once you start to see a little bit of smoke coming out, that's when you can add your steaks in there. So the steaks have been kind of just sitting here in the rub, just kind of forming a like wet crust, if you will. But so now they've been dried off, and we've had them, marinating with the rub. And once this pan gets up to temp, we're gonna add them in. We're gonna put a little bit of oil in there and get that crust going. All right, so now that our pan is starting to smoke, I'm gonna put a little bit of oil in the pan, and we're gonna get the crust going on these steaks. We're gonna go with the big boy first. That's what you wanna hear as soon as you hit the pan. You wanna hear that sizzle. You're gonna make sure you press down a little bit on the steak so it's got a good even sear on there throughout, and it's not just leaving a puck or like a ring around the outside of it. You want every surface of the steak to be crusty. And since we've already cooked these, up to an internal temperature of 115 degrees, they don't need long on each side, maybe 2 minutes max. Oh yeah, that's what we're looking for. All right, so now we're gonna flip them because these are starting to look, oh yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
That is looking good. And so now that we've got the crust kind of going up here on the outside, you can see how that's just starting to come along very nicely. We're gonna use our little GrillGrate temperature gauge here to see what we're looking at.
Go in the center there. So
Going right in the center. Oh yeah, we're perfect. We're looking right where we need to be.
What's it at?
Right now it's sitting at about 120.
Oh, perfect. Because we're going to pull off at 128. So we're probably ready to do, you want the butter?
Yes, yeah, let's go ahead and do the butter.
Butter makes everything better.
You can be pretty liberal with the butter.
I say throw it in there.
All right, so now you've got your butter melted in there, you can kind of throw in the garlic and the herbs. Kind of fry those herbs. You can hear them crackling a little bit. That's going to help.
I love that sound.
Oh yeah.
It's a happy sound.
It's going to help infuse the butter that you can put all over the steaks to kind of help form another crust. And we're all about crust on the steaks. Oh yeah. Look at that. That is beautiful. We can pull our steaks off to let them rest. That way when you cut into it, it doesn't bleed all over the plate. And you want to have all those juices sealed in there by the time they're sitting and resting.
So if you cut a steak right away, you're basically killing the steak. All the juice runs out and it's no longer juicy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just... We'll pull out our grill grates here. And we go into the center.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. That's perfect.
Oh my gosh, right on the number, 128. Perfect.
That's exactly where we wanted to be.
Okay, so before we turn the flame back on, why don't you throw that additional brandy in there?
Okay.
And then we'll flame it.
Gotcha.
Because those pan drippings, we can add that to our sauce. It's going to be delicious. So here we go. Step back. There you go. There you go. Well, that does that. I'm going to fish out my herbs. And it's okay, some of the shallots are coming out. Don't worry about that because all of their goodness is already in my sauce. That looks so good.
Yeah, the smell is just amazing.
I know, it's amazing. While you're reducing that, I'm going to reduce this. We'll do a double reduce and then we'll marry them up.
You got it.
So I've got 1.5 cups of cream, and this, you can see, has reduced and it's got a little bit thickness to it. And you can see the specks of thyme in there. It looks beautiful. And I'm going to put this cream in here. And you can see it's already pretty thin, so I'm going to turn that flame back up. So this is a pepper sauce. So I'm going to I took just whole peppercorns, and I took my cast iron skillet and I smashed them just to break them up some. And I'm not going to put a lot of them. I'm going to put some just to give the sauce some additional flavor and body. And then these are green peppercorns. And I found these locally. They are hard to find, so you can just go with the black peppercorns. They look kind of like capers, but they're not. They're green peppercorns. They come in a jar. It looks almost exactly like capers, and I usually find them by the capers. So I'm going to just put a spoon of these into, maybe a couple spoons because I like them. And then there you go.
Although just like capers, they can be a little overbearing if you use too much.
That's correct, because they are briny. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. And then when we get this reduced, we can kind of pour some of those pan drippings with that reduction in here, and it's just going to create additional flavor. But this has got to come down. And the steaks are resting while we wrap up these details, and then you're going to see just how gorgeous they are. Yeah. So this just needs to reduce probably another 5 minutes, and it should work out perfectly because by the time this gets reduced, we incorporate some of that sauce. Our steak should be perfectly rested.
Yes.
Okay, so the sauce is reducing beautifully. I'm going to take it off so I can take a look at it.
Oh yeah, that smells amazing.
And so, you know, we have these beautiful pan sauces you saw from earlier. I'm just going to, I don't want any of the stuff on the bottom because it's kind of like grit, but I'm going to take some of this other sauce and just kind of put it in there. It's just going to add more flavor. You know, we didn't add any salt to this. We didn't do that because a lot of the ingredients we're putting in it have salt. So we're going to taste it and we'll adjust it. It might need a little more black pepper, might need a little more salt, but we'll test that before we plate. And you do want to, as it starts to thicken, you do want to kind of keep stirring it because it will
burn on the bottom.
It will burn on the bottom.
Scorch it.
So what you're looking for is what's called napping. You want to go on the back and where you see how I drew the line and it didn't disappear. So we're going to give it another minute and we're going to add our cheese in it. It's just a tablespoon of Parmesan cheese. It's finely ground. It just kind of gives it a little bit more umami.
A little more bite.
A little more bite, a little more depth. It's sort of like a secret ingredient to this sauce. But when you go to add the cheese, you have to turn the heat off or it will separate. So you don't want to add the cheese when it's hot like this. Okay, so now we turn off the heat and we're going to come over here and put it here. Get it off the hot burner. Put this in, just a tablespoon. We're going to stir it to kind of bring it all together and we're going to taste it. Guess first.
Well, thank you. Oh, yeah.
I don't think it might need just a pinch of salt.
Yeah, I was going to say just a little bit of salt.
I think it needs a little pinch. It's good, but it needs a little pinch. Maybe 2 pinches. I love salt.
There we go. That's it.
That's it. All done. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to plate.
Okay. Let's go with the big boy.
I think the Big Daddy, yeah. And then the sauce. You just want to stir it because you got all that pepper in there. You want to bring it all forward. And I just kind of come over it with a little ladle so I don't drip it all over my plate. Okay, looks great. And then we just have a little parsley. Chives would be great on this. Just something to give it a little color. I can't believe how beautiful that is, Zach. You did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Ta-da! Score on that one.
Definitely.
You did it.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Are you proud?
I'm very proud of that.
You should be very proud.
I'm very
it's
proud.
Beautiful. And just like that, you too can have a championship steak for your loved ones. Other than the time we spent putting that in the sous vide, or you could put it in the oven, as we mentioned before, for the reverse sear, 20 minutes from start to finish, you can serve a championship steak to your loved ones. Simple as that. Zach, I just cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Oh, I've had so much fun as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Coming over on your day off to cook, that's a big deal. I understand that. So I just really have just had a blast with you.
Oh, thank you very much. Me as well.